One of the best parts about living in Europe, specifically in Germany, because of its location, it's easy to travel. Europe is a very, very culturally and historically rich location, and the countries are pretty small, so you can actually hit several of them very quickly. Going out on a weekend, it's not unreasonable to hit more than three countries, in a single drive. That all being said, the last 2 years have been very, very different in Europe. Those that are familiar with the free European Union open borders, those were not the same. Those were basically locked down. And the hardest part about this situation was that the rules changed daily. And when rules are coming down in different languages, it makes the environment really unpredictable. So yes, there was pockets of open borders again in Europe from 2020 to 2021, but it was really hectic, and it basically made it impossible for family to come out and visit and for you to plan any kind of a trip with any sort of reasonable lead time, right? Who wants to buy tickets somewhere when the country gets locked down before you get out there and you lose your several hundred or several $1,000 investment? So Europe and the European tourism experience was basically non-existent for the last 2 years. Not only was it non-existent, but things like your normal home life were completely radically redesigned or shook up. So playgrounds, this one's kind of interesting. Playgrounds were actually closed down. Outside playgrounds for little kids were closed down, roped off, and not allowed for children to play outside. So it was a really rough winter. And the restrictions went as far as to basically ban Thanksgiving, Christmas. First of all, the Germans don't celebrate Thanksgiving, right? But as far as the restrictions, they made Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's impossible to celebrate. You were not allowed to gather for more than two households, or adults from two separate households could not share the same space for just even an evening, right? And so that made holidays very, very dark. Coupled with the normal winter depression, it was not a good time. A lot of the airmen and soldiers that came out here during this time, they spent their first 2 years just living in this dorm to work lifestyle, and it probably really hurt resilience. So that's a separate issue altogether, but it has to be brought up, and we can't forget about that. That all being said, was there travel during the COVID restrictions? Yeah, there was. It was small. It wasn't frequent, and like I said, it was unreliable. But since 2022, I can tell you that the travel that you might have, anticipated is coming back, and I think it's pretty much here to stay. Since January of 2022, I came back from a deployment, and I've been able to go to Normandy and see, all these great sites like Mont Saint Michel, the Eiffel Tower, Versailles, the Louvre. And even though I've been to Paris multiple times, all these sites were always kind of unattainable, or at least not visitor friendly, because the crowds. Paris is the #1 tourist destination on earth, but for the first time ever, it was a surreal experience. There was not a single line to go to the top of the Eiffel Tower, or to visit the Louvre, or to walk the halls of Versailles. And I was actually able to do that with my family. All three major attractions in a single day. Normandy, the D-Day beaches, and Mont Saint Michel also did not have any crowds. It was amazing, and I'm very thankful that I got to experience that. That being said, since the beginning of the year, earlier in the spring, we were able to go to Spain, and the only restriction we experienced in Spain was submitting our COVID status to the actual country of Spain. They have an online, basically a registration form. And the funny thing was, getting on and off the plane was hassle-free. I mean, it was back to the old days. There was no test or anything like that. I didn't have to prove, outside of my vaccination and my recovery status. So that was very interesting. Additionally, Sicily was also one of our earlier destinations in the year. And if you don't remember, Italy was like the European epicenter of COVID when it first kicked off. There are a number of reasons for this, but we didn't know what to expect. So we took a chance. We bought a Ryanair flight for a very good deal. And getting to Sicily the crowds are starting to come back. It became apparent there, but the country was completely open. And never once did we have to show our vaccination status. Masks were still here and there, but it was personal preference, right? And that's always going to be there. But Sicily itself was beautiful, and it felt like it used to feel like, several years ago at this point. And then more recently, for the Father's Day weekend, I was actually able to go out with my family to Switzerland, to the top of the Swiss Alps in a beautiful town called Kandersteg. And even at the top of the mountains, you could see that the crowds were coming back. I mean, it was kind of bittersweet, right? It was nice to see everybody come out again, but to see the crowds and the tranquility of nature kind of mixed up, it did remind me that, I was fortunate to have been able to see all this stuff, and that you can too, right? So I think there was a really nice sweet spot right there in the middle where COVID kind of actually made Europe a little more open to its local residents. But as far as coming over here, if you plan to travel, it looks like we have a good way ahead. And but it doesn't mean that we're completely out of the woods. Now, Covpass was an app invented at the end of 2021, or maybe not invented, but available. And the Europeans put a lot of money into this system. It's basically an application that was kind of mandated that you carry on your phone. And this app would, you would go to a pharmacy, and it was throughout the EU, and you would go to the pharmacy and you give them your vaccination, records, in this case, vaccine card, and you would show them this, and then you would give them your recovery letter that you get from the doctor or what have you. And this would all register your current status, and you would get a QR code on your phone, and you could show this to go into any business. And so the funny thing was in 2021, when they rolled this out, they came up with this very convoluted system, 3G, 4G, 2G, and it basically prioritized the availability of businesses and buildings, really, as to what you could visit or what you could use when you were in this system based on your current status. And so if you did not have a full vaccination status, you could not go into a retail store to buy clothes. You could go to a grocery store, but there were always caveats, and the rules would change, and it would follow some sort of model. And as I mentioned, not only were the countries different as far as their rules, but the states within the countries would change on a regular basis, and that's what really made it difficult. But the funny thing was that Covpass was very short-lived. I mean, I work in communications, so I have some sort of idea, and I know how difficult some of these programs can be to pick up. But this one was very short-lived. I mean, probably no longer than 2-3 months that it was actually fully implemented throughout the European Union. And then as another reminder, as an American, I took a Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Johnson & Johnson, it was not recognized by the Europeans to be an actual vaccination. You'd have to get a booster on top of the Johnson & Johnson to be fully vaccinated. And then if that booster was basically just got you level, it didn't actually give you boosted status. So there were a lot of nuanced kind of problems to the system, but it was a big lift, and it makes you wonder if it's not going to be something that they can, reutilize later on. So that's why I kind of put some caution out there. The restrictions might come back, but I guess they have this structure built so that they can anticipate or more easily adapt to it. And basically, my testimony is that as an American, you can actually use the Covpass system. I'm not sure how friendly it's going to be for you to be a tourist and to come out here if you're just coming for a momentary visit. But at this point, it looks like we're almost out of the woods. And if there was any other proof to this, it would be, I just went to a Metallica concert this weekend, and not a single person in a crowd of thousands was wearing a mask except for some healthcare workers. So yeah, it looks like we're back to normal, and it's very welcome, just in time for the summer. So if you're coming back and you heard all the horror stories about the lockdowns, they were very, very, very bad. It basically made this place very dreadful, and I know the German citizens feel the same pressure. But it looks like we are on the upswing and things are looking bright. So if you're coming, prepare to travel, start writing your bucket list down and make the most of it, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If you have any questions, comments, throw them in the comment box. Thank you for watching, and please hit the subscribe button.